Hello, it is I. Welcome back. My name is Wendy Ivan Martinez and I'm a geek. Today, we're going to be talking about all the books that I read in January. So let's just jump into it. Okay, let's just So per usual, I will put this video in the order that I ranked the books. So 1 star, 2 star, 3 star, 4 star, 5 star being at the very end. So just so you guys know, my rating system goes as follows. 1 star is it's terrible. I either DNF'd it or I just hated it. 2 star is meh, didn't really like it. 3 star is it was good. 4 star is this is effing fantastic. I really enjoyed it. And then 5 star is like god tier perfection. I will read this again. So that is my tier ranking system. Now let's go move on to the books, because I actually had a pretty kick-ass month for January. We did have a couple flops, but overall it wasn't that bad. So let's get started. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started with my 1 star reads, because I actually did have one star / DNF this month, and that is Pandora's Jar by Natalie Haynes. I tried listening to this one, and at first I was like, oh, this sounds so awesome. This is a more like feminist take on Greek mythology, but it just dragged on and it wasn't holding my interest at all. It was just kind of boring, and I'm like, okay, I'm not feeling this. I don't want to force myself to read or listen to something that I just cannot for the life of me get into at all. So I ended up DNFing it at like 20%. So I'm actually going to end up selling this on Pango Books to somebody that will appreciate it and enjoy it, because it is honestly still in like perfect condition. It just wasn't for me. Now let's move on to my 2 stars. Now this one is a little bit on the higher end of the 2 star, because this one, I wanted to give it a 3 star, but it dragged on so long that I couldn't. And that is Hall of Smoke by H.M. Long. I really wanted to like this. Like towards the beginning, I loved this book. In this book, we basically follow a young woman named Hessa, and Hessa is a warrior. She is like a priestess for the goddess of war named Yang. And at the very beginning, Hessa is disgraced by her goddess. Like she does something that she's not supposed to. She was supposed to unalive this man, but instead Hessa offers him company. And then a couple nights later, while Hessa is in exile and trying to get forgiveness from the goddess, her whole town is like unalived, including her cousin and her husband. And now Hessa basically has to track down this man because she thinks that he is the reason why all of her village was unalived, and basically put a stop to it. And the more Hessa goes on this journey, the more she realizes that her people and her goddess and everything else is not as it seemed. There is a lot more layers to it, and at first this book was so good. Like it was very fast paced. The very beginning reminded me of like the very first episode of Demon Slayer, where we have Tanjiro and he goes back to the town and he sees that everybody is unalived and it's just him, and the only one that makes it out is his sister Nezuko, which I named my dog after. But after that, things started to get a little bit slow. After page 100, it just started to really drag on, and it wasn't keeping its pace. It started to really slow down and become very boring and dull. It got to the point where I didn't even want to finish it. I ended up finishing it on the Libby app using an audiobook. I already dedicated 300 pages. Might as well just dedicate the last 100 pages to find out what happens. And I don't know, I didn't like the pacing. It started off so good. It started off as this amazing tale, and then it just died out. It just fizzled out. It's like a fire that fizzled out. It just, I don't know. Now we're moving on to the 3 star reads. For the 3 star reads, the first 3 star that I have is The Scenic Route, and this was a short story that I got on Kindle Kindle read for free or something like that. First reads, Kindle first reads. In this book, we follow our main character, who is a mother. We follow the mother as she does the van life. Like, she has a child, but something happens to where she has to be separated from her child and the father gets full custody, and because of that she decides to like run away instead of actually trying to keep connecting with her child because her child wanted nothing to do with her. And she starts going on these van adventures. She buys a van and she steals a van actually, and she starts going on the road and across the country on these like van adventures, and it was really good. I feel like as a mom, it's very like I like reading books that have to do with motherhood and mothers because I'm a mother myself. However, I was just so annoyed by the fact that she could just leave her kid, but then it made me really think about it and like the circumstance, and it just I just thought about a lot of things, okay? And I read this whole book while I was taking a bubble bath. But it was good. Like, it was more on like the higher end 3. Yeah, it's a higher end 3-star for me. The next 3-star is Notes on an Execution by Danya Kukafka. Now, this book is so interesting. It's told in multiple POVs. Once you get to the killer's point of view, it is told in second person, so it's like you, and then the rest of the book, I think it's in like third person. This basically talks about the mind of like a serial unaliver, and what goes on through his head as he is approaching his execution time, and how the victims are affected, how the families of the victims are affected. And while it was good, I just felt like for some reason it lacked something. It lacked something that I couldn't get that into, if that makes any sense. I just felt like it was a little bit slow, and I guess you can say that I've been in a reading slump. So reading all these slow books, like, just, I don't know, it didn't help with my reading slump. I needed something that was very like fast paced, and I didn't get that with a lot of these books. It didn't hit as much as I wanted it to. So it could have probably been a more impactful book and probably have gotten a higher rating if I had not been in a reading slump, but because I had already been reading all these books that were just so slow paced and weren't giving me that like drive that I needed, it just didn't make the mark, if that makes any sense. Now, next is my 3.5-star, and that is Blood on the Tracks by Shuzo Oshimi. This is another book that started off very slow. So this is a manga about our two main characters. So we have the mother, and then we have the little boy, her son, who is our main character. And this little boy is often being told that his mother's very overprotective, that his mother's really weird, that why is his mother like that? Like, he has such like a helicopter mom. Like, why is she so like protective? Like, it's one thing to be a mom and like be protective of your child, but what she does with him is just a little too bonkers. And at first the little boy is like, you know what, she's just a mom, she's my mom, like, I love her, you know. But as more and more the story progresses, he starts to realize, yeah, you know what, these people might be right, and maybe she is a little, you know, a little overprotective. And then something happens at the very end, and then he's like, okay, she's not just overprotective, she's bonkers. So that's this book, and it's good. It would have been higher than a 3.5-star for me had it again just like been more fast-paced, but it was very slow-paced up until the end. But the ending does hook you, and it makes you want to continue on with the series. So even though it was very slow, at the very end it's like and it's like, okay, I'm invested. So that is why it is a 3.5-star and not just a 3-star. Alright, so let's move on with our 4-star books. Now, the first 4-star is Iron Widow by Xiran Zhao. So I actually used to watch her YouTube channel like in 2020. I used to watch it very consistently. I loved her videos, and I was excited when she was coming out with a book, even though it is YA, and you guys might know that I don't typically read YA. This was so good, okay? This was like female rage, female power, female, like, This was so good. In this story, we basically follow our main character, and our main character, I forgot her name. I forgot how you pronounce her name. So we follow our main character who, honestly, her name is very hard to pronounce. Like, I don't even want to try it because I just feel like I'm going to butcher it. But we basically follow her as we see her in her society. And in her society, these women are viewed as, like, very low, very, like, beneath, bottom of the totem pole. She has her feet crushed by her grandmother and her mother because they're like, a man's gonna want you if you have small feet. So she has this limp because she got her feet crushed out as a young child. And then women, the highest honor that they can possibly do is to become a yang seat for these males. So like the female counterpart for like males in this like big machine called a chrysalis, where they basically control this, like, kind of like, think of like Transformers, you know, like they're controlling them, but they're not robots. They're like these like beautiful like beings. They're like giant foxes and like giant turtles and giant tigers and birds, you know, like they're beautiful things, but it requires a yin seat and a yang seat, and the yang seat is always occupied by a woman. But however, the yang seat, the women are usually not as powerful as the men, so they tend to die after one sitting. And her sister actually got sentenced to become a yang seat, and the family, instead of being upset, were like so honored because they know that that means that it's more money for them to turn around, so that the brother could turn around and be a warrior. And this girl, she was like so upset. She's like, why do you not realize that this is messed up? Like, why are we so little? Why are we worth nothing as women? Like, she is so against the way that the society is, and she is not having it. She's like, I am avenging my sister. I am avenging my, women in its whole. And we follow her as she becomes a yang seat, and she isn't destroyed. She actually makes it through her first battle, and they're like, what is wrong with this girl? Like, there's something different about this girl. And yes, there is. She is there to cause chaos. She is there to turn the world on its head. It's just so good. This was just so good. She did an amazing job. I listened to the audiobook because, like I said, books that I'm not sure if I'm gonna like or not, I usually tend to listen to the audiobooks. And I actually might go back and reread it in its physical form, because it is worth the read. Just like I'm gonna go back and actually read the physical Throne of Glass series because I actually really did like it. I want to go back and reread this physically because this was amazing. This was amazing, and I can't wait for the sequel. The next 4-star book is The Paleontologist by Luc Dumas. I don't want to go too into detail because this is also another one that is a part of my reading books based solely on the cover. I really enjoyed this. Okay, in this one we basically follow our main character Simon, and he is a paleontologist. He grew up in a really messed up childhood, a addict mother and a little sister. Like, he was very neglected and he had to take care of his little sister, and dinosaurs were basically like his escape from reality, his escape from all the horrible things that go on at home. One day his mother comes to him and she's like, hey, I got you guys tickets to the museum, take your little sister. And he takes his little sister to the museum, who is then 6 years old, and then his little sister goes missing. He never sees her again. And obviously it causes a lot of trauma for him because his mom ends up blaming him, even though she left them alone to go to the museum alone. Like, why would you send a 10-year-old and a 6-year-old to go to the museum alone? Makes no sense. But because of this, like, Simon always kind of blamed himself, but he did stay very dedicated to becoming a paleontologist. So when he grows up, he ends up getting a job at this museum, the very same museum that his little sister went missing. And he realizes that once it starts to get dark, these dinosaurs might have like a little mind of their own. You know, they might not be just dinosaur bones. They might actually still be alive for some odd reason. And we follow Simon as he tries to uncover all the conspiracies behind the museum, behind what happened to his sister, behind why their dinosaurs are actually alive and roaming around at night. It's so good. Like, I really enjoyed this. I was shocked when I finally finished it and I looked at the Goodreads reviews and I saw that they were They're like a 3.6, you know, and I was expecting it to do better. And I get it, like the middle sort of dragged on, but once we got towards like the ending, everything wrapped up very beautifully. I really enjoyed this. Like, I enjoyed this a lot. Like, I liked how it dealt with depression, with PTSD. Yes, it was slow during the times that he was depressed and stuff, but like when you're depressed, you don't feel a drive, a motivation. I liked what Luc Dumas did with the story, with the plot, with the representation of depression here. It was just great. Like, it was great. Okay, I highly recommend this one. I highly recommend this one. Don't follow the Goodreads reviews of this one, because actually this one was actually very good. It does drag on in the middle though. It does drag on in the middle. Like I said, I read a lot of like slow-paced books this month, but this one didn't bother me as much. So my next 4-star book, I finished in a matter of days. This is like a 4/4.5 star, because at the very end is when it actually slowed down for me. So it was very fast paced up until the end, and that is Among Thieves by MJ Kuhn. This is another book that I read a part of the Buying Books Space Slowly Off the Covers reading vlog that I did. So think of this book, think of like Throne of Glass, but make it more adult and make it sapphic, and add a little dash of Pirates of the Caribbean to it, and a group that's very much resembles sort of like the vibes of like the Guardians of the Galaxy characters, that like sort of dynamic that they have. And then you get Among Thieves by MJ Kuhn. This book is so good. Oh my gosh, this book was so good. It was so good up until the end, then it slowed down a lot, like the last like 50 pages or so, it slowed down. But up until that, I was, whoa, this book was so good. So in this book, we follow a group of criminals, right? With our main focus being on Rhea, this assassin, this bad assassin right here, who is basically an assassin for a leader of this like criminal group called the Saints, and she is on the hunt for this artifact, and they all go on the hunt for this artifact that is owned by a very powerful man called the Guildmaster, who pretty much he is powerful, okay? And they're like, okay, this is a suicide mission, but we're gonna go anyways. And the reason why is because Rhea has her own plans for this artifact, not really knowing that, I mean, it's a group of criminals. So they each and every one of them have their very own plans for this mission and the reason why they're going on it. So yes, it's a suicide mission, but the drive, the possibility, the reward was very worth it for a lot of these characters. So I really enjoyed this one. I just thought it got very slow, like the last 50 pages, but it was definitely very like entertaining enough for me to want to carry on and finish and move on to the next book. And now we are down to our 5 stars. So the first 5-star is Orange to You, Dear One by Ichigo Takano, and this is the latest and last book in the series. I don't want to go into too much detail because I talked about this series so many times. It is about our main character. Her name is Naho. She basically is able to, she gets a letter from her future self, and in that letter it says there's this boy in her high school that's going to come in, and she's the only one that can protect him, because at the end of the year he's no longer going to be with him unless she does something to stop it. And that, it's so good. Like, you guys know, if you guys follow my channel, you guys know that I'm a sucker for like time loops, parallel universes. I love that stuff, and this has all of that. Okay, this book was so good. This manga series was so good, and this is actually going to be the last one, the actual conclusion to that whole series. So it was very beautiful and bittersweet, and I enjoyed it. Now, the next 5-star is for a reading vlog that's going to be coming out in March, and that is A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. I haven't read this series. I read this one, but I haven't read the rest of them. So I'm actually going to be doing a reading vlog where you guys get to read and follow my thoughts with me as I finally read this very, very famous series that literally probably everyone and their mother has read. And I have read this, the first one I've read for 3 times now, and I loved it. Okay, I noticed the third go around, I'm like, okay, this is very slow paced. I don't know what it is, like, that with Sarah J. Maas, I don't mind the slower pacing. There's something that she just does that even though it's slower paced, it's still very entertaining to me. I don't know, but I heard that it becomes very fast paced as the series goes on. So I'm very excited to continue the series because like I said, I read a lot of slow paced books in January. So I'm very excited to finally read something that's a lot more fast paced. So I'm excited to move on to the next book in the series. If you guys don't know, this series is about a girl named Farah. Farah has her family, and she basically is hunting one night for her family to have food in their bellies, and she ends up killing a wolf that ends up being a fairy or fae, and in return this beast comes in knocking on her door, and then he's like, hey, you killed one of my people, so in return I'm going to take you and you're going to live with me, because that's the way that this treaty works. And that's what Farah does. And that's what happens. And it's really good. Like, I really enjoyed the first one. I mean, I've read it 3 times, so obviously I enjoyed it, right? And I can't wait to finally actually read the rest of them instead of reading this one over and over and over and over again without continuing. And then the last book, the #1 book. This was my #1 book in January, and that is The Three-Body Problem by Cixin Liu. This book, it was so good. Okay, like this book, I'm so excited. I started the year off with a bang because this is the first book that I read in January, and this is a sci-fi that basically follows this like VR sort of style game, but we also follow real life as well. And in real life, we follow our 2 main characters, one in the past, one in the present. And the character in the present, he is basically trying to figure out why a lot of physicists are unaliving themselves. And then the more he goes into finding out why, he discovers all these conspiracies. And he literally discovers that physics are probably not real and the whole universe, because he literally sees the universe flickers and that there might be other life forms out there, and there's this like video game, VR sort of video game that somehow ties into what's going on in real life, and you sort of have to piece everything together as the story goes on. I don't want to talk too much about what it's about because this is a book that you find out with the main character as the story progresses. So it starts off a little bit confusing, but as the story goes on, you also follow the main character and everything that he finds out as well as we go with the pacing of the story. This is actually going to be a Netflix series that comes out in March, and the creator of Game of Thrones is working on it. So I have high hopes because the commercial already came out and it looks effing fantastic. I'm so excited for it. Anyways, you guys, that is everything that I read during the month of January. Let me know what you guys read down below. What was your favorite book of January and what was your worst book of January so far? And if you reached this far, leave me a leaf emoji because dinosaurs eat plants. I don't know. Or if there's a dinosaur, leave me a dinosaur. I don't know if there's a dinosaur emoji, but if there's a dinosaur, leave a dinosaur. If there isn't, a leaf will do. And if you haven't yet, please hit that subscribe button and turn on that notification bell to be notified when I post. I post 2 to 3 times a week. Thank you so much for watching.